Inside a hospital nursery, doctors had a treatment that could save premature babies, but they refused to use it freely because they were waiting for perfect scientific proof. Every day, fragile newborns fought for life, while the cure stood just a few steps away, locked behind medical caution. Some babies survived but went blind forever, and others died while doctors continued testing. This was not an accident, but a decision made in the name of science, and what happened inside these wards became one of the darkest stories in medical history. During the 1940s, premature birth often meant almost certain death because hospitals had very few ways to keep fragile newborn babies alive. Then oxygen therapy began saving infants who previously had no chance of survival, and doctors believed medicine had finally discovered a miracle treatment. Hospitals quickly filled nurseries with oxygen machines, survival rates improved, and parents finally began taking premature babies home, alive, instead of planning funerals. But behind the celebrations, doctors slowly noticed a terrifying new problem beginning to spread among surviving children. Many premature babies who survived oxygen treatment later developed severe blindness. Parents noticed their children could not react to light, and hospitals soon realized entire nursery wards were producing blind infants at shocking rates. Doctors suspected excessive oxygen was damaging the eyes of newborn babies, but nobody knew how to balance survival and safety. Too much oxygen might cause blindness, but too little oxygen could kill fragile infants struggling to breathe. Medicine was trapped between two disasters. To settle the debate, hospitals began controlled experiments on premature infants. Some babies received high oxygen levels, while others received restricted oxygen, so researchers could compare the results scientifically. Doctors carefully recorded survival rates, blindness cases, and breathing problems, believing the studies would protect future generations. But while the experiments continued, some infants died from low oxygen, while others survived only to lose their eyesight forever. Parents watched helplessly as newborn babies became part of a medical experiment, driven by the search for better evidence. Eventually, after years of observation, debate, and hospital trials, researchers finally reached a conclusion that could no longer be ignored, because the evidence clearly showed that excessive oxygen exposure played a major role in causing blindness among premature infants across multiple hospitals. Once this understanding became widely accepted, medical institutions around the world quickly changed their oxygen therapy practices, and hospitals began carefully controlling oxygen levels instead of using them freely as they had done in earlier years. And as a result, the number of babies developing blindness dropped dramatically in many countries. However, this medical breakthrough came with another deeply disturbing and painful discovery that complicated everything even further, because some hospitals that reduced oxygen levels too aggressively began noticing an increase in infant death rates, suggesting that while they were successfully preventing blindness, they may have also been unintentionally putting other babies at risk of dying from lack of sufficient oxygen. This created a devastating moral and medical dilemma, because the world had finally solved one life-threatening problem, but in doing so, it had revealed another hidden danger that made doctors question whether the solution itself was also costing innocent lives in a different way. In the end, the medical world achieved clarity and understanding, but that knowledge came at a heavy emotional and ethical cost, because behind every statistic were real newborn babies, real families, and irreversible consequences that could never be undone. The tragedy left a permanent and deeply unsettling impact on modern medicine, because it did not just change one treatment or one hospital practice, but it changed the entire philosophy of how science interacts with human life, especially when the subjects involved are too fragile to speak, too weak to resist, and too innocent to understand what is being decided over them. In the years that followed, the medical world slowly began rebuilding itself with a completely new mindset, because institutions realized that progress in science cannot be measured only by discoveries and survival statistics, but must also be measured by the ethical cost of reaching those discoveries in the first place. Hospitals, universities, and research organizations around the world introduced strict ethical review systems, where no experiment involving human beings could proceed without independent approval, moral evaluation, and clear safeguards designed to prevent vulnerable patients from being exposed to unnecessary risk in the name of research. These changes were not symbolic or temporary, but became permanent foundations of modern medical practice, because the memory of what happened in those neonatal wards remained too powerful to ignore, and too painful to ever allow repetition without oversight. Premature infants, who were once unknowingly placed at the center of one of medicine's most controversial experiments, became one of the most protected groups in healthcare history, receiving advanced monitoring systems, carefully controlled oxygen levels, and highly specialized care protocols designed to eliminate the kind of uncertainty that once led to irreversible consequences. But even with all these advancements, improved technology, and strict regulations, the legacy of those events still exists in the background of modern medicine, like a silent warning that never fully disappears, because every medical decision involving risk still carries echoes of that historical tragedy. Medical students are taught about such cases not only as historical events, but as ethical lessons, because they represent the dangerous intersection between scientific ambition and human vulnerability, where the desire for certainty can sometimes overshadow the immediate reality of suffering patients. And yet, despite all reflection and reform, the most disturbing element of this story remains unchanged, because it forces society to ask the questions that do not have simple answers, and perhaps may never have complete answers at all. How many lives should ever be placed at risk in the pursuit of scientific certainty? And who gets to decide when enough evidence is enough, especially when the cost of waiting for that evidence is measured in human suffering? Is it more ethical to act immediately with incomplete knowledge, or to wait for absolute proof while real patients continue to face danger in the present moment? And perhaps the most haunting realization of all is that the people responsible for these decisions were not driven by cruelty, but by a sincere belief that they were protecting the future of medicine, even while the consequences of those decisions were unfolding in real time inside hospital nurseries. They were doctors, researchers, and scientists who believed in evidence, logic, and progress, but they were also human beings operating under pressure, uncertainty, and fear of making the wrong decision in a field where even hesitation can cost lives. This is why the legacy of this story is not simply about what went wrong, but about how easily good intentions, scientific ambition, and institutional pressure can combine into outcomes that no one originally intended, but everyone becomes responsible for once they unfold. And that is why this chapter in medical history continues to be remembered, not as a closed case, but as an open warning that still speaks to every generation of doctors who will one day face the same impossible balance between saving lives today and proving certainty for tomorrow. Some of history's greatest medical breakthroughs came from decisions that still disturb the world today. And behind many scientific discoveries are forgotten people who suffered while doctors searched for answers. If you enjoy dark medical history, shocking true stories, and powerful documentary-style videos, subscribe now, because the next story is even more terrifying.